At my brother's promotion dinner, I was relegated to the children's activity table. Folding chairs, no formal arrangement, just a flimsy paper label attached to the cloth that read, Ashley, currently unattached to employment and, frankly, uninvited. Laughter rippled across the room like a tangible wave. His boss, a broad man with a smug grin and an overpowering amount of cologne, gestured in my direction and chuckled. Unbelievable, she actually showed. He projected his voice for everyone to hear. I rose slowly, my wine glass still in hand. My gaze locked with the man whose sweaty palms held my brother's career. "You might want to check your portfolio, Mr. Harrison," I murmured. The room didn't fall silent immediately. Not yet. But someone choked on their drink, and for the first time that evening, my brother Dylan stopped smiling. 6 months earlier, I wasn't jobless. I was chief of regulatory adherence for a mid-tier financial tech enterprise. A role demanding 12-hour days, rigorous regulatory audits, and absolutely zero margin for error. It wasn't glamorous, but it was real, and I excelled at it. I'd ascended from an entry-level intern to departmental oversight in merely half a decade. The kind of rise that stems not from favors or networking, but from showing up when no one else would. Weekends, holidays, late nights, all meticulously logged in spreadsheets, all for a company that proclaimed me family. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, Mr. Jenkins, the CFO, entered my office and shut the door. "Ashley, this isn't personal," he stated, avoiding my eyes. "We're restructuring. Your role has been merged." Merged? I had dedicated 5 years to sculpting that position from scratch. I packed my belongings in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I simply went home, uncorked a bottle of wine, and stared at the blinking cursor on my untouched resume. My brother, Dylan Hayes, remained silent that week. No calls, no texts, no inquiries about my well-being. He'd always been the perennial golden boy, stellar grades, debate club captain, swiftly launched into the tech sector via family connections. I didn't resent him, not initially. But growing up, I was forever Dylan's sister. Not Ashley, not an individual with aspirations, merely an adjunct to his illustrious curriculum vitae. Still, I supported him tirelessly. I applauded the loudest at his college graduation. I bought him champagne when he landed his job at Summit Financial Solutions. I even reviewed the fine print of his first equity agreement, pro bono. So, when I lost my job, a single message from him would have meant something. Instead, 2 weeks later, a glossy invitation arrived in the mail. "You are cordially invited to celebrate Dylan Hayes' elevation to executive director, presented by Summit Financial Solutions." Addressed to Miss Ashley Hayes. No provision for a guest, just my solitary name. "You're not seriously going, are you?" That was Brooke, my best friend since college. We sat on her couch, surrounded by empty takeout containers and judgment. You don't enter where you're unwelcome. That's a fundamental principle. I re-examined the card. The company logo gleamed in raised ink. The venue, an exclusive rooftop overlooking downtown, the kind of place accessible only if you're wealthy, influential, or someone's pawn. "Perhaps I intend to remind him who facilitated his ascent," I said, folding the invitation. What have I to forfeit anyway? As a Scorpio, I thrive on these sorts of challenges. The night of the dinner, I wore a sleek, tailored sapphire gown, sharp contours, hair neatly swept, heels that punished my feet. I wasn't there to impress anyone. I was there to observe. The room swelled with tailored suits, champagne, and conversations layered with ego. People I'd once emailed, individuals I'd assisted through audits, all feigning non-recognition. Then I spotted the table. Tiny, tucked away, a parody of celebration. Disposable plates and cheap trinkets like someone's idea of a joke. And there it was, my designated spot. Ashley, currently jobless and frankly not wanted. The words were handwritten carefully. It wasn't an oversight, it was intentional. "That's just malicious," a quiet voice spoke behind me. It was a woman I didn't know, perhaps an intern. Her eyes were wide. Was that genuinely deliberate? I didn't answer. I simply walked directly to the center of the room where Dylan stood clinking his glass with a spoon. Behind him stood Mr. Harrison, his boss, the man who'd laughed. "I wish to propose a toast," Dylan was saying, "to those who truly signify." That's when I interrupted, not loudly, just audibly enough for those nearby. "You might want to review your equity valuation, Mr. Harrison," I stated. He didn't laugh this time, because 2 hours later, an investor bulletin emerged. By Monday morning, Summit Financial Solutions faced financial inquiry, and I was no longer without employment. The taxi ride home after the dinner was silent. I gazed out the window as city lights blurred past, my grip tight on that place card, unemployed and unwanted. Not just a jest, but a declaration, one my own brother lacked the spine to prevent. I didn't cry, I was too focused for that. Somewhere between the laughter and the toast, I'd remembered who I used to be. The quiet girl with the clipboard at compliance meetings. The individual who detected 3 internal fraud instances in 4 years. The one who red-flagged suspicious activity, saving the company over $9 million in penalties. They thought I was invisible. That made me dangerous. Back at my apartment, I retrieved my old laptop, dormant since my dismissal. Still packed with bookmarked portals, SEC filings, industry intelligence, the ingrained habits of a mind that never truly powers down, typical of a persistent Scorpio. Summit Financial Solutions. I typed it in and watched their investor site load. They'd gone public 2 years prior. A modest IPO, respectable growth, but I recalled something about them from even before that. My old company had considered partnering with them. We'd conducted due diligence, and I had seen a minor red flag. Then, it was a negligible detail. A variance in vendor agreements and R&D allocation, too minor to warrant concern. But now, I had time, I had motive, and I had nothing left to forfeit. The next morning, Sunday, I started digging. Summit's Q3 filings were pristine, almost too pristine. Consistent revenue growth, minimal losses, but the breakdown of their licensing income didn't match the patent activity I was tracking through the Federal Registry. That wasn't just odd, it was potentially misleading. They were recognizing income from software licenses that hadn't actually cleared final approval. In accounting terms, revenue accelerated, not unlawful, but certainly unethical. Should investors uncover this, things could get very complicated. The next step was simple. I took screenshots, filed PDFs, created a disposable email. Then I drafted a short, anonymous heads-up and sent it to an independent finance blog run by former analysts. I didn't say much, just dropped a few numbers, a few keywords, enough to catch the eye of someone who knew what to look for. Licensing income discrepancies and inflated R&D valuations. Summit Financial Solutions Q3 might warrant a closer look. No signature, just initials, AH. Monday morning, I didn't expect much, but at 9:52 a.m., my phone vibrated with a news alert. Summit Financial Solutions under scrutiny over Q3 reporting after anonymous post goes viral. By noon, their stock had dipped 5%. Not a crash, not yet, but enough to spook institutional investors. At 1:16 p.m., an email arrived from a private equity firm I'd worked with years ago. "Ashley, not sure if you're still engaged, but we spotted an analysis online that resembles your insights. If you're open to consulting, we have a situation requiring your expertise." And just like that, I was no longer jobless. That night, Dylan called me for the first time in months. "Ash," he said, his voice strained, "you were right. Something's unfolding. An internal audit memo was circulated." I didn't answer immediately. "Did you have any prior knowledge?" he asked. There it was, the suspicion, the subtle fear. "Why would I know anything, Dylan? I'm merely the unwanted sister, remember?" Silence. "I didn't pen that," he muttered. "But you didn't halt it." That, I considered, was far more reprehensible. By Wednesday, Summit's stock had sunk 2 percentage points. Journalists were investigating, armed with anonymous documents, some originating from me. I hadn't shared anything private, no confidential files, just public records that told a very different story when looked at side by side. It wasn't about dismantling them, not yet. It was about reminding them I perceive what they attempt to obscure. A Scorpio's penetrating insight. By Friday, I had a new, lucrative, short-term consulting engagement. The kind secured when people recall that behind a quiet compliance officer possessed a forensic intellect. I didn't post about it, didn't gloat, but I did buy myself a quality espresso machine. Small celebrations matter when you're rebuilding. And then, just as I sat down to catch my breath, a LinkedIn message from Summit's CEO, Mr. Harrison, popped up. Ashley, I'd appreciate a private discussion. I believe we began on an unfortunate note. No apology, just a forced olive branch. I smiled because he didn't grasp what was coming next. The CEO thought I'd be flattered. He didn't grasp the board already had my name. They weren't seeking casual chat. They were on the verge of a desperate proposition. And they had no idea how prepared I already was. The message from Summit's CEO sat in my inbox all night. Ashley, I'd appreciate a private discussion. I believe we began on an unfortunate note. He hadn't included a phone number, just a vague invitation and a calendar link. At first, I ignored it. I wasn't in the mood for rehearsed charm or corporate backpedaling. But the next morning, an email from a distinct name appeared. Ashley, I'm reaching out on behalf of the board. We believe your insight could be valuable in light of recent market activity. Please let me know if you're open to a confidential conversation. That name, Miss Kennedy, resonated. Former SEC auditor, now a non-executive director at Summit. And unlike the CEO, she was someone who actually read financial statements. My reply was concise. Available Wednesday morning. Please forward the non-disclosure agreement. The Zoom call was scheduled for 8:30 a.m. I attired myself for combat. A tailored blazer, immaculate hair, sharp gaze. Even if they couldn't see my footwear, I wore heels. It's a state of mind, a Scorpio's determination. When the screen blinked to life, I found myself confronting not only Miss Kennedy but 3 additional board members. All older, all male, all excessively polite, indicating their unease. Thank you for joining us, Ashley, Miss Kennedy said. We're cognizant you may have noted certain discrepancies in our fiscal reporting. You could say that, I replied. One of the board members leaned forward. We believe there may have been a series of oversights in how executive reports were assembled. I cut in calmly. Oversights don't typically exhibit patterns across 3 consecutive quarters, nor do they align precisely with executive stock option grants. The silence on the call stretched long. One of them cleared his throat. Look, we'll be candid, Miss Kennedy said. The situation is escalating. We want to bring someone in to conduct an internal review. Quietly, discreetly. You require an external party, someone regulators would trust, with an unblemished record, understanding both finance and adherence. They didn't state it outright, but I knew what they meant. The CEO's credibility was crumbling, and they needed someone to clean up before the real heat arrived. And you want me? I said. Miss Kennedy nodded once. You flagged these patterns before anyone else. We believe you're uniquely positioned to help us contain this. It wasn't an apology. It was an employment offer, cloaked as damage containment. I asked for time to consider. I didn't need time. I ended the call and stared at my screen. This wasn't just about a consulting engagement or corporate cleanup. This involved the very man who permitted my public humiliation, now compelled to acknowledge I was the sole individual capable of preventing his empire's collapse. I dreamed about moments like this, but now that it was real, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt focused, poised, perilous. The kind of clarity a Scorpio gets before striking. I called Brooke. Let me surmise, she said. They want to employ you. The board desires a discreet, quiet internal review behind the CEO's back. And what do you want? I didn't answer right away because I wasn't entirely sure yet. Revenge, closure, a seat at the table from which I was unceremoniously ejected. Or perhaps I just wanted to remind them that ignoring people like me comes at a cost. I desire the truth to resonate, I said. Brooke snorted. "You sound like a cinematic preview." "I've been worse." That weekend, I met with Miss Kennedy in person. A small cafe, no logos, no suits. She brought a folder. Inside, a preliminary scope, key personnel, initial concerns. She was careful with her words, but didn't conceal that internal tensions were boiling. The CEO's been minimizing the figures. The CFO is compliant or blind, we're not sure yet. "And Dylan?" I inquired, sipping my coffee. "Your brother?" She looked up, surprised. "He's prominently featured on the internal promotion shortlist. We assumed you were aware." I froze. Promotion to what? Chief Strategy Officer, provided things stabilize. So that's what this was. Dylan wasn't merely a bystander in a toxic culture. He was being cultivated for further ascent. This altered everything, igniting a Scorpio's vengeful fire. Later that night, I retrieved my old compliance journals, the ones I used to keep when training staff on audit integrity. A line I'd written years ago jumped out. "Figures don't fabricate, but the individuals who present them often do." And suddenly, I knew exactly what I had to do. When I entered Summit Financial Solutions that Monday morning, no one offered welcome. There were no balloons, no introductions, no polite smiles. I wasn't an employee. I wasn't a guest. I was entirely something else. A threat they hadn't yet classified. The board had kept my arrival confidential. I was officially hired as an external compliance consultant to assist with financial realignment. Translation: I was there to quietly examine the rot. And everyone knew it, especially Dylan. He located me in the break room around 10 a.m., holding a mug with the company logo I'd once celebrated for him with champagne. "Ash," he said, feigning nonchalance. "Didn't realize you'd actually accepted the position. I didn't look up from the coffee machine. Didn't realize you were considered for Chief Strategy Officer." His expression faltered for a split second, not enough for most people to catch, but I knew my brother. I saw it. "It's not official," he said. "They're just exploring options. Options that include giving you access to long-term growth plans and financial structuring." He tensed. "You believe I was involved in the discrepancies?" "No," I said calmly. "I believe you've kept your head buried in the sand, which is nearly worse." He opened his mouth, but I cut him off. "Don't worry, I'm not here for vengeance, Dylan. I'm here for facts. But if you're part of the numbers that don't reconcile, you'll be included in the report, familial ties notwithstanding. A Scorpio always seeks the truth, no matter the cost." That shut him up. I spent the next 2 days combing through internal files. Unlike most consultants, I wasn't looking at top-level summaries. I went deep into buried emails, Slack threads, unpublished memos. The cracks were everywhere. Deferred expenses inconsistently logged. Third-party payments routed via shell entities lacking clear deliverables. Crucially, a pattern of strategic disclosures timed precisely before stock option vesting. It was textbook executive manipulation. Not enough to scream fraud yet, but more than enough to raise regulatory eyebrows. And guess whose name kept appearing in the periphery? Dylan. Never directly signing, but frequently carbon-copied, often present, perpetually silent. He wasn't masterminding the schemes, yet he wasn't challenging them either. He was safeguarding his career path. And suddenly, the unemployed and unwanted place card made even more sense. They attempted to discredit me because they anticipated what I might unearth if I scrutinized too deeply. A Scorpio's gaze penetrates. On Wednesday, I met with Miss Kennedy to debrief. "The pattern is worse than I expected," I said, handing her a file. 3 quarters, at least 4 executives involved, and selective reporting that could expose you to serious liability if regulators catch it first. She leafed through the pages, her face tightening. "How confident are you? Confident enough not to care who gets uncomfortable." She nodded. "We'll need to present findings to the full board next week." Quietly. "There's one more thing," I added. "Your CEO isn't merely negligent. He's consolidated internal influence, purged dissenters from decision-making, and is attempting to elevate my brother into a senior role for which he lacks qualifications." We were told Dylan was a stabilizing presence. He's a convenient presence, and I believe he's being positioned to absorb the repercussions. That gave her pause. Can you prove it? Not yet, I said, but I will. That night, I sat in my apartment with the files spread across my table. Brooke texted to check in. How's the mission going? Found the smoking gun yet? No gun, I replied. Just a slow leak in the foundation. Because here's the thing people don't understand about corruption. It's not always loud, not always dramatic. It's subtle, structural, institutionalized. And people like Dylan don't create the corruption. They benefit from staying quiet about it. That's what made him dangerous. On Friday, I stayed late. Most of the building was empty. I logged into the shared network archive using credentials miss. Kennedy had secured, and that's where I found it. A draft memo from the CEO's executive assistant, never dispatched, never published. Subject: Strategic PR Plan, Mitigating Audit Fallout. In the draft, should reporting structures be compromised, we propose repositioning recent promotions, specifically D. Hayes, as central to ongoing transparency reforms. Their proximity to internal shifts facilitates a controlled narrative. My brother was the contingency plan, a scapegoat with a polished resume and a surname implying loyalty. They were going to use him and then discard him if the heat got too close. I stared at the screen for a long time. Part of me wanted to protect him. The big sister instinct doesn't die easily. But then I remembered the smirk he wore when I walked out of that dinner. The silence when my name was mocked. The way he never asked if I was okay. You made your bed, Dylan, I murmured. As a Scorpio, one reaps what one sows. I received the email at 7:03 a.m. No subject, no signature, just one sentence. You might wish to reconsider submitting that report. There was no sender listed, just a scrambled relay domain I couldn't trace without forensic tools, but I didn't need to trace it. I knew what it meant. Someone within Summit Financial Solutions was aware of my actions and desired my cessation. I stared at the screen for a full minute before closing my laptop. Not because I was scared, because I wasn't surprised. This is what happens when people in power feel exposed. They don't confront directly. They isolate. They sow doubt. They push back just enough to induce hesitation. But I didn't hesitate. I dressed, blazer, low heels, clear mind. If they wanted me out, they'd have to do more than send a veiled threat. That morning, Miss Kennedy met me in a side conference room. I showed her the email. She didn't flinch. They're testing you, she said calmly. It means they're scared, which means you're close. How many people knew I was compiling the report? She deliberated for a moment. Only the board and Dylan. I raised an eyebrow. You informed my brother? Not directly, she said, but your name arose in an executive prep meeting. The CEO inquired about your presence. Dylan remained silent either way. Of course he did. Silence, his preferred form of allegiance. The report was nearly done. 48 pages, detailed financial discrepancies, timelines, cross-reference transaction logs, and a breakdown of misleading disclosures, all matched with documented executive activity. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist. If regulators saw this, Summit Financial Solutions would face formal investigation within weeks. Stock prices would plummet, executives would fall, possibly facing charges, and at the center of it, my brother's name. Not as a criminal, but as a bystander. A silent figure in rooms where the wrong decisions were being made. Was I willing to do that? To scorch the earth, even if it meant consuming him in the flames? A Scorpio's loyalty is fierce, but so is their justice. That night, I left the office late again. The parking garage was almost deserted. I unlocked my car and slipped into the driver's seat, noticing something on the windshield. A printed paper, folded once. No note, just a screenshot, a line from my report, a highlighted paragraph about Dylan. Someone had accessed my files. Someone wanted me to know that they could get to me, or worse, that they could use my own work to discredit me. For the first time since this started, I felt it. Not fear, not guilt, but clarity. They weren't merely protecting a corporation, they were safeguarding themselves. And individuals like me, women not meant to disrupt, were expendable. But not this time. A Scorpio doesn't yield easily. The next day, I met Dylan in the cafe across from the office. He was already seated, phone in hand, coffee untouched. He didn't look up when I sat down. "You've made your point," he said. "Everyone's discussing your presence. The CEO is furious. You've created a debacle. I'm rectifying one at my own expense." I didn't blink. "You knew, you attended those meetings, you saw the figures. That doesn't imply I instigated anything." "No," I said softly. "It simply means you allowed it to transpire, and now you expect my protection." His jaw tightened. "I'm your brother, Ash. And I was your sister the night you watched them ridicule me. You remained silent then. Why should I shield you now?" He leaned forward, voice dropping. "You believe exposing this will provide closure. You'll just be a footnote in another scandal. No one truly cares about compliance consultants, Ash." I stood. "They will when she's the one who foresaw it all. A Scorpio's foresight is often underestimated." I left him there, his coffee untouched, his future unraveling. That evening, I finalized the report. I added one final section, recommendations, including immediate executive leadership removal and referral to external regulators. Then I attached the memo, encrypted the files, and sent them. Not to the board, but to an external legal team experienced with federal auditors, complete with whistleblower protection. Because if they were going to try to erase me, I'd make sure I left a trail too loud to ignore. The following morning, I received a call. Not from Dylan, not from Miss Kennedy, but from a journalist. "Ashley Hayes. I'm covering internal whistleblower claims at Summit Financial Solutions. Your name came up. Can we talk?" I didn't answer immediately because I wasn't ready to go public. Not yet. But the fact that he had my name meant someone was leaking things already, either to shield themselves or to blame me. 2 days after I submitted the report, the CEO called an emergency leadership alignment meeting. Translation: crisis management. He booked the entire top floor of the Summit Financial Solutions building. Private dining room, catered breakfast, long oak conference table, the identical space used for Dylan's promotion dinner. I walked in exactly at 8:59 a.m., report binder in one hand and silence wrapped around me like armor. The room was full: executives, board members, department heads, and Dylan. He was seated near the end in a tailored suit, flipping through his phone like nothing was amiss. The CEO stood at the head of the table, a tight smile stretched across his face. "Ashley," he said, "thank you for attending. We're here to realign strategy following your recent documentation." He avoided investigation or whistleblower report, but everyone in the room knew. They'd read the report. They'd seen the charts, the memos, the discrepancies. They were scared, and they should have been. "You've caused quite a stir," the CEO continued, still smiling. "So, we thought we'd let you clarify a few things. You know, set the record straight before rumors take hold." I smiled back, calm, professional. "You mean before regulators read the exposé going live in 2 hours? His face twitched. "Excuse me?" "A journalist contacted me," I said, placing the binder on the table. I corroborated what I could. The rest was self-confirmed: internal leaks, former personnel, investor communications. The room shifted, chairs creaked. Coffee cups paused midair. Eyes darted between faces. "Ashley," Miss Kennedy said gently, "are you sure? You engaged me to report the truth," I stated, "and truth doesn't belong shelved." I opened the binder. "Let's walk through a few highlights, shall we?" Page 1. Quarterly financial reporting inconsistencies, revenue recognition manipulation. Page 2. Executive stock timing patterns preceding market announcements. Page 3. Projected use of Dylan Hayes as strategic fall guy in internal communications. I avoided his gaze for now. I let the implications linger. The CEO shifted in his seat. "Now hold on, that's speculation." "It's your assistant's memo," I countered. "Page 31, your annotations are in the margins. Shall I read them aloud?" He went quiet. Then I turned to Dylan slowly, deliberately. "You could have halted this months ago. You were present. You saw the figures, you understood their actions. He didn't reply, but his hands tightened. And instead of speaking up, you stood by as they humiliated me at your promotion dinner. I didn't write that place card, he mumbled. No, I stated, you just watched me sit down in front of it. The room was frozen. So, here's what's going to happen, I said, and I handed Miss Kennedy a sealed envelope. My resignation, effective immediately. I've accepted a full-time directorship at a firm prioritizing ethical oversight and its analysts. I turned to the board, but I'm also submitting a final recommendation. Replace your CEO within 72 hours, or I go public under my authentic name. A Scorpio's resolve is unyielding. That did it. The CEO's mouth opened, ready to bark a response, but Miss Kennedy raised her hand before he could speak. That won't be necessary, she said, her voice steady. We've already outlined a transition plan. Ashley, thank you for your service. I gathered my things. As I reached the door, I paused, turned, and looked at the man who had once called me a gold digger nobody. Oh, I told Mr. Harrison, one last thing. You might want to review your stock prices again. This time, the room fell completely silent. 3 weeks later, the headline proclaimed, Summit CEO departs amid financial review. Whistleblower report spurs board action. The article didn't name me, nor did it need to. My phone buzzed nonstop. Former colleagues, analysts, even investors asking if I was available for advisory work. I wasn't. I'd already committed as Director of Regulatory Strategy at a firm 3 times Summit size, boasting superior ethics and a more generous coffee budget. 1 month later, Brooke and I sat on a rooftop, watching the sun descend behind the skyline. So, she said, raising her glass, what's next? Next, I smiled. Now I see shrinking. As a Scorpio, I reclaim my power. And Dylan, I shrugged. Still at Summit. Different office, smaller view, no promotion, no spotlight. Do you think he regrets it? He doesn't have to, I said. His silence already spoke volumes. This narrative isn't about vengeance. It's about recognition. The kind that doesn't arrive with applause, but with the quiet strength of knowing you were correct all along. To every woman dismissed, belittled, or underestimated, let them laugh. Let them seat you at the children's table. Then smile and construct the table they'll one day implore to join.